Hey guys, how you going? This is BillyEatWorld and it's Tactical Tuesday again, which is the day we take a look at some of your favourite tactical shooters. And last week I put up a poll for you guys to vote on what you'd like to see on this channel, and by far the #1 tactical shooter was Insurgency. So today we're going to take a look at a topic a lot of you guys ask me about all the time, which is whether Insurgency and other tactical shooters could ever work on console. And this is a pretty broad question, I know, but in any case, I'm going to give it a go, so feel free to let me know what you think in the comments section below. So why is this question relevant now? Well, recently it was announced that the sequel to Insurgency, Insurgency Sandstorm, will finally be coming to consoles in 2017. And what's more, it's still going to be developed by NWI, and it's not going to be published by one of the big publishers, which means it should stick to its roots. It's also apparently going to include a new story mode, as well as a framework for esports, and it's even going to include an old school split screen co-op mode. So all in all, it looks like a cool idea, but the bigger question is, will it pass the requirements I think any tactical shooter needs to pass to make the jump to console? Now, to kick off, I think the main requirement for any tactical shooter to succeed on console would be whether or not there's actually an interested player base. And previously I probably would have said there wasn't, but I think recently Rainbow Six Siege has shown that the genre can survive beyond the PC. That being said, I do think the popularity of Siege has got a lot to do with the fact that there isn't a lot of present-day military shooters out there, but even taking this into consideration, it's obviously built up a respectable player base, and I think this leaves the door open for more tactical shooters in the future. The next main requirement I think would be for the game to be simple enough to play with a controller, which immediately rules out games like Arma 3. And that's because you really need a full keyboard to play this game at even its most basic level, meaning that any port of the game would have to be seriously cut down. On the other hand, the controls in Insurgency are probably even simpler than BF4 because the game has a focus mainly on infantry combat. And also it's not bogged down by a ton of gadgets or special abilities, so unless this drastically changes in Sandstorm, I think it'll pass this requirement just fine. Now, assuming a game could pass the first two key requirements, a lot of PC games like Arma 3 for example, still wouldn't port very well because of hardware specs. And that's because games designed for PC, especially when it comes to shooters, are generally a lot more hardware intensive. So I think that obviously pretty much rules out Arma, but Insurgency on the other hand is a much more basic game that runs on the older Source engine, which means hitting a decent frame rate on even low-end rigs is entirely possible, and I feel like consoles would have no problem running it at all. That being said though, Insurgency Sandstorm will apparently be running on the new Unreal 4 engine, which obviously is much more advanced. So logically, this will probably increase the system requirements, but I'm also assuming the devs won't change the core style of gameplay. In a nutshell, Insurgency in a lot of ways is like a smaller hardcore version of Battlefield, except that the player cap is only around 32 players. So bearing this in mind, if they stick to this and if they optimise the game well, I can't see it being harder to run than BF5, which means it should be able to run well enough on console. Now, I think so far we've established that a console port of Insurgency would work, and an Arma 3 port probably wouldn't, but what about Squad? Squad is popular, it's got relatively simple controls, and it also runs on the Unreal 4 engine, so it seems to have the first three requirements ticked off. The problem is that Squad is still in alpha, and by the time it actually comes out, it's not going to be anywhere near as simple as it is now. And what I mean by this is at the moment it kind of plays out like a big tactical TDM, but as far as I know, it's going to end up being very, very in-depth like a game like Arma. The other thing about Squad is that it's being developed by a team that was heavily involved in the Project Reality mod for Battlefield 2. So I'm guessing that Squad isn't going to be a game they just release and then bug fix, it's going to evolve as time goes on. And as far as I can tell, that's not going to mesh well with the stricter console certification process, assuming they even want to bother buying into licensing. For example, look at how long it took Minecraft to come to console, and look how it's always a few generations behind. I feel like the same thing would probably happen with Squad. Now, finally, no discussion of tactical shooters would be complete without talking about the one thing all of these games I've just mentioned here have in common: modding. I mean, for example, Project Reality and Insurgency both started as mods, and just about every Arma 3 server runs at least a few. I'd even go as far as to say that the reason most of these games have lasted so long is because of modding. And I think it's also been established by now that modding is never going to become commonplace on console, which means that ports of these games could never really be the same. So I think this kind of leads me into my last point, which is that as well suited as any of these games might be for console, I doubt we'll ever see a direct port of any. More likely, I think the devs are going to go down the route Insurgency has of releasing the sequels or maybe even alternate watered down versions on console. I think the far more likely outcome though is that Insurgency will be the only current tactical shooter franchise to make it to console, and new AAA franchises will spring up instead. Because now that Siege has shown that there's actually money in console tactical shooters, I can't see why EA or Activision wouldn't take a crack at making one of their own. But anyway guys, that just about wraps up this video, so let me know what you think in the comment section below, and as always, if you like what you see, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Also, check out the links in the description below if you want to see any more of my videos, or if you want to support my channel on Patreon, and until next time, see you later, and have a good one.